heroes and was the only guy at the studio who'd ever read a Marvel comic book.
So we've got a person who actually did the work, the person who organized the club, and I was just a fanboy at the time with my fan perspective of receiving Marvelmania. So that's what this presentation is about. So let's get the lights down and we'll start.
This is it. It's either this,
This is
all the way
it?
off. Yeah.
Are you really?
It's okay.
Are you sure? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want them off?
Let's get the lights off.
Okay.
People can hear us talking and the images are beautiful. So here we go, folks. The first club of Marvel Comics was in 1965, or 66, 65, 64. And this is the Merry Marvel Marching Society. And these are some of the things. And of course, this was the song. Right? They don't write theme songs like they used to. We love the merchandise, the posters that were rendered by Marie Severin over a different artist's works. The t-shirts. The poster, more t-shirts. A lot of Jack Kirby stuff. Right? The stationery. The newsletters that they put out. Merry Marvel Messenger. Mark, you probably remember getting all this stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Look, one of the first biographies of Jack Kirby that people read about as Marvel fans. And then in 1969, I think Stanley wrote the lyrics to the song. This was a feature showing all the different Marvel artists and people that worked in the Merry Bullpen. Of course, Kirby was a main proponent of the original Marvelmania, which Mark Evanier and Mike Royer would both share. But there's Kirby in 1969. And who's that in the background, Mark Evanier? Yes, so there he is, Mark Evanier. Kirby confidant, co-worker, associate, working for not the Merry Marvel Marching Society, but that's why San Diego Comic Fest is proud to present the 50th anniversary of not the Merry Marvel Marching Society, but of Marvelmania. My name is Armin Schumer, and welcome Mark Evanier, and a last second edition, that's why he's not on the graphic, Mike Royer. So Mark, let's start. As I show images, just feel free, because you were there, to just say whatever you want to say about, and Mike, obviously, when we get to specific artwork that you've done, this is just a freewheeling, unlike people who saw my last lecture on Steranko, this is a much more open-ended, I'm just going to show images in some kind of rough order, but we'll start with the fact that it seemed like, as a fan receiving the Marvelmania stuff in late '69, it was really Kirby was the main visual proponent of Marvelmania, and that's Steve Sherman, I believe.
That's Steve Sherman.
And there's young Mark Evanier with our friend Jack. So here is, hey Mark, do you remember where this was at? This was Kirby's house, I'm assuming?
No, this was taken at Jack's first home in Los Angeles, in Southern California. This was down in Irvine, California, before he bought the house that is in Thousand Oaks. This would have been
Turn this slightly so
probably,
these guys can see.
this would have probably been late 1969.
Right.
This photo.
Right after Kirby moved to California,
Yeah,
right?
he was in Irvine for about a year before they bought a house in Thousand Oaks.
Here is the first thing I remember seeing. I was in summer camp in 1969, and I think that's what, because it's dated October, but I just feel I remember it from summer camp. It was only years later that the image was colored for the Kirby Collector by John Morrow. But again, Mark, any recollection about this first?
Well, what this was, the Marvelmania company, give me a minute here, Earl. The Marvelmania company was independent of Marvel. Marvel had licensed the right to this man named Don Wallace to run this company. And Wallace was the organizer of it. In July of 1969, I was invited as the president of the local comic book club to go down to Irvine and meet Jack Kirby. The day that I was going to go down there, I didn't drive at the time, I was going to take the bus down to meet some friends, and one of the friends' mother was going to drive us to Irvine. That's how young I was. And on the way there, I stopped off at a newsstand, picked up the new issue of the current Marvel Comics, the first of that month's Marvels that had come out. And of course, back then, all the Marvels had the same ads in them, and they were, so the first comics of the month were the first time you got to see that month's ads. And there was the first ad for Marvelmania in there. And I looked at this and it said Marvelmania, Culver City, California. And I thought, gee, the comic book industry's far off in New York City. I lived in West Los Angeles. It's amazing. Is Marvel opening an office out here or what? What's happening there? So on a whim, I went to a payphone. I called directory assistants and asked for Marvelmania International. And they gave me a number, and I phoned it, and this man named Don Wallace answered. And I said, hi, my name's Mark Kennedy, I'm the president of the local comic book club. We've just heard about this your Marvelmania thing, and we'd like to find out about it and such. And he said, oh, well, great, come by right now. Come by the office. And I said, well, I can't come by right now. I'm going to Irvine to meet Jack Kirby today. And he said, oh, give Jack my best and come by tomorrow. I said, where are your offices? And I assumed they were in Culver City. Mike will tell you this. My life has abounded in many strange coincidences. The Marvelmania offices were 4 blocks from that phone booth. So I said, I'll come by tomorrow. We went down that day to meet Jack Kirby, my friends and I. That's about a 3-hour story, a day that changed my life. But while we were there, Jack was very impressed with how much I knew about comic books and about Marvel history and about the Marvel characters, and mostly who'd written and drawn them and who the people were. I was always more interested in the people who'd made the comics than I knew the characters in the comics. And when we talked about Marvelmania, Jack said to me, that guy who's doing this stuff, I've been working with him and doing material for him, he doesn't know the characters, he doesn't know anything about comics. He really needs someone like you there to tell him what the characters are. He thinks he owns Captain Marvel. So the next day, when I went to the Marvelmania offices, which were on La Cienega Boulevard in Los Angeles, not all that far from where I lived, he said Jack had called and suggested they hire me. And he said, this is a smart guy who knows all about comics, and one of the many ways Jack Kirby changed my life. Jack had done 8 posters for the original offering.
Which we're going to show a little while, so hold any specific
They were
things.
going to put out 8 posters. Jack was basically going to design the whole Marvelmania merchandise thing because A, it was important that that Jack be involved in this stuff because he was involved in so many of the characters and the creations, and he was their best designer and such. And B, someplace in this world there was a spirit that said we've got to have more business deals than Jack Kirby can get screwed out of. So Jack got treated very badly by this, and would have gotten treated worse if myself and a few other people like Steve Sherman had not been working at Marvelmania to try to protect him a little bit. But he did these 8 posters, beautiful posters. He inked them himself. Maybe I hate the word definitive, but his definitive depictions of some of these characters. Marvel had vetoed having a whole line of Kirby posters. They said you've got to have other artists in the line. So dump at least 4 of the Kirby posters and do 4 posters by other people. This was Jack's Captain America poster. We repurposed the art for the cover of the Marvelmania magazine, but this was designed to be one of the original 8
Wow,
posters.
really?
And it did not get to be, as soon as we go through this, we'll identify the original 8 posters that were going to be there and talk about how they were changed. But it was one of the first times Jack got screwed on this, and not the last. Yes. But
So you open up the cover, a lot of these images I got off the internet, I'm not sure, was this the opening spread of that first
this was
issue?
the first issue. What happened was that you were supposed to order the Marvelmania membership kit. And Don Wallace had this idea. He wanted to have a magazine that kids could subscribe to. And we wanted to stick the first issue in the membership kit. So in about 3 or 4 days, I threw
But look
this
at
issue
Mark
into
Evan
my
here, you
signature
wrote the
down there.
opening editorial.
Yeah, I wrote most of the magazine.
Yeah.
Just kind of taking stuff that was lying around the offices, artwork that I had never seen before that was there, Marvel stuff that he had found. And we put together this magazine in time to stick it in with the membership kits when they were mailed out as a surprise bonus to try and get the readers to feel more like it was part of a club and that they were going to be kept informed, that they could subscribe later to the magazine. They got the
But
first
this
issue-
was like a
first
test
came for free,
issue.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, only a month or 2 later, we got the first issue formally of the Marvelmania Monthly magazine, as
Right.
it was called.
Yes.
With one of Kirby's greatest Black Bolt images and greatest pencil drawings that has been used and reused and inked and colored over the decades. But this was the first time we had seen it.
Right, yeah, Jack did this for the magazine as a kind of a favor to me, because we hit it off well, and Jack, at this point, still had hopes Marvelmania would turn into something that would actually pay him some money, which it
Well, at
very
about
rarely
this
did.
same time, I met Mark. And through a mutual friend, he and Steve came down and visited me at my house where I was living in Whittier, California. And it wasn't long after that one night I'm walking from my studio in the backyard to the house, the phone rings, I answer it, and it says, "Mike Royer, this is Jack Kirby. Alex Toth says you're a pretty good inker." And that's how I met Jack. I went to his house the next day, and
But somebody told...
but one of the reasons he called me, he had mentioned at Marvelmania to Mark, and Mark seconded Alex's recommendation, and so that's why Jack called me. And I went to his house, and I inked his biography page for Marvelmania, where he's sitting at the drawing board. Everybody knows the picture. And I told him, he said, "I'll bring it tomorrow." And he says, "No, just do it here." So I sat at his drawing board. Fortunately, I always took all my art tools with me in a box.
Hold on, okay, I gotta correct this.
Please do.
Okay,
Mark
all right.
remembers everything.
Okay.
Lean to
I
Mike.
may have misled you when we talked yesterday about something. You inked that drawing for Jack before I ever met Jack.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It was prior to that.
Yes. Who knew? All right. Because I saw that drawing the first day I ever went to the Marvelmania offices. What happened was that Jack was inking some of the stuff himself. He decided he didn't want to ink a lot of it. He asked Alex Toth. Alex recommended Mike. I had nothing, I get no credit for that. Later on, I'm the one who kept telling Jack, "This is the guy who's got to ink your New Gods books," and stuff like that. That was the recommendation I gave Jack, because I had become friends with Mike, and I thought he was, terrific and
Well, and it's
very good.
interesting how incestuous all this
Yeah.
stuff works out, because
Well, the art world's a small world.
I recommended Mark as a writer to the editors at Western Publishing, Go and Key Comic Books. So we're all like some big extended
So
family.
Mark.
You recommended me to George Sherman at the Disney Publications Department.
Well, then they
And
recommended me to
Mariette
Chase.
Ford, yes.
God, this guy remembers.
Rolling along, Mark,
All right.
tell us about Marvelmania Messenger. This was the news thing? Do you remember? Did you write this?
Probably.
Okay, because here's another...
Yeah, I wrote most of the stuff that came out of Marvelmania, and I designed that logo at the top.
Now, I want to talk about the beauty...
And that's Mike Royer's lettering on the bottom of the page.
That logo is like how they do the Marvel Cinematic Universe logo.
Yeah.
Now,
They stole it from you.
I just want to show you, as a young artist, I love that Marvelmania logo, and years later, I obviously got to pay homage to it when I designed the logo of my Silver Age book, which, by the way, is for sale in that big room. But anyway, but yes, this was my homage to, and I didn't know until relatively recently, Mark, when maybe a couple years ago you told me that you had designed that Marvelmania, the images and the faces, so I owed my cover to you.
In fairness, I should say that I got the idea because of a logo for the Los Angeles Zoo that was on the side of every bus in Los Angeles.
With the zoos inside the letter, the animals. I mean.
Face inside each of the letters.
Okay, so here's issue 2, which for many of us, I believe, was the first time we learned that Marvel had just gotten the license to do Conan the Barbarian, and this was our first exposure, I believe. We had seen, Barry Smith from earlier Marvel doing his kind of Kirby knockoff style, but I believe this is the first time we saw a Barry Smith Marvel Conan image.
Yeah, I established a relationship on the phone at this point with Roy Thomas. He was my source of Marvel news to put in the magazine. And Roy was at this point putting out the first Conan the Barbarian issue, and was really interested in trying to promote it any way possible, because
And there it is.
he didn't feel he was getting a lot of support from Marvel. I think one of the moments of comic book history that has not been fully noted is how Roy got them to put out this Conan the Barbarian comic, and everybody at Marvel quietly predicted it would flop and be a disaster, and the early sales figures seemed to indicate it, but they kept it going, and it caught on and became one of the biggest hits they ever had.
And it was really the first non-superhero genre in mainstream color comics that was not a superhero since I think the introduction of the Silver Age Flash.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Conan represents, coming out in 1970?
In July of 1970, Steve Sherman, myself, and Mike Royer shared a hotel room in New York. We went back and went to the New York, my first comic convention there. And there was a panel on the future of comics where everybody held forth on why Conan was going to be such a flop because it didn't fit the at that point, narrow definition of what the marketplace wanted. And the narrow definition of what the marketplace wanted was, Conan should be in the present day with a superhero costume and a cape, and things like that. I mean,
Was that Stan Lee's idea?
No, I think Stan took hands
Martin
off.
Goodman?
I think it was Martin, I think it was just the business people at Marvel
Wow.
who traditionally had to be kicked, dragging and screaming into everything new. And the people at DC were kind of gloating about what a flop this book was and how, it was, what was Marvel thinking putting out this Barbarian comic? And as I said, the early issues did not sell particularly well. I believe that if Conan had been published by DC with the exact same sales figures, they would have canceled it with number 6.
Right, that was the issue, that everything died at DC.
But as it happens, Roy got them. Roy deserves some certain credit for this. He kept it going, and Barry Smith was on it in part because he was their cheapest artist, I think. And they did things like this cover was inked by John Burport,
Yeah.
not by someone they had to pay on the outside. He inked it on staff time
Wow.
to save $30 or whatever, $20.
And it's really bad, I mean, it's mismatched inking, Smith style.
But I mean, the thinking is, we're not going to have the best comic we can, we have the cheapest. And the book caught on because of Barry's work and Roy's work and the history of the character, and it was a success. But Roy gave me a lot of material to put in the magazine because he thought,
And also coming at a new decade, the early 70s, it was something new for the 70s, and it ended up being the most dominant genre in the 70s with Savage, Sword of Conan, everything. Okay, moving on, Marvelmania magazine number 3 had a cover feature, pencil and inked, by a very misunderstood or unknown, yet very prominent Silver Age inker, Dan Adkins, who we weren't used to seeing inkers both pencil and ink their own stuff. We knew Dan Adkins mostly as an inker, and at Marvel, every now and then he would ink Kirby, but Kirby, as you said, did not like his inks.
Yeah, Dan Adkins was the only inker Jack ever asked to be removed from his work until he replaced Vince Colletta with...
I mean, look at a spread like this. Many Kirby fans like Dan Adkins' inks on Kirby, and I find it hard to believe Kirby disliked this enough to say, take this inker off the book.
Well, if you've been to panels I've done over the years at Comic-Con, you've heard, John Buscema probably, you got to hear John Buscema say he didn't like your favorite John Buscema inker. When an artist pencils and someone else inks it, the artist comes in from a very different standpoint and what he thinks his work should look like. And
Right, Mike Royer?
yeah,
Are you paying attention?
Well, this is as a result of Marvelmania, but as a result of me doing that biography page of Jack,
Right.
and then inking several headers for mail order pages for merchandise and stuff from Marvelmania. I did a lot of work with Jack, and when he left Marvel to go to DC, I was supposed to be part of the package because he would have his inker and letterer
Right.
with him on the West Coast. DC wouldn't have it because they had some sort of
Vince
a
Colletta.
handshake promise with Vince Colletta, and he was doing it for $18 a page. And after 4 issues, Mark and Steve had pointed out to Jack all the things that Colletta wasn't doing and ignoring in his powerful pencils. And so when Jack realized that, I guess I'm paraphrasing, that DC would supply work for Vince because he always liked people to be working, then they finally said yes to me, and I'm sure they figured that I would flop, and to their chagrin, I didn't. But all of this came out a result of
Right.
Marvelmania.
yeah.
So why was Dan Adkins called the thinking man's inker in this 1969 Marvel annual photo feature?
He probably wrote the caption himself.
Yeah, but speaking of writing, I just found out recently that a year or 2 prior, he had both written and, I think, pencil maybe the greatest single Thunder Agents Tower story, The Death of Mentor. Did you know that he had written this?
He wrote that story, yes.
Who knew that Dan Atkins was a writer? Every now and then.
Wood had all his crew writing and stuff
Yeah.
like that, yeah. To back up here for a second here, let me make a point here. One of the things that I encountered in 1970 in the comic book industry was there was a strong belief at Marvel and at DC, more so at DC than at Marvel probably, that the company created the books. You couldn't create a comic book outside the office. And in comes Kurt Swan's pencils, in comes Murphy Anderson inks, things like that. But the company was really the author of the book because they put it all together and they put the DC touch on it and they retouched what they felt like retouching and they colored stuff they wanted to color it. And the reticence to have Mike Royer be Jack's inker was, you can't do a comic book in California. It's got to be done in our office. And Vince Colletta had been a loyal guy who worked for DC for years, and they were at that point phasing out the romance comics, which were his mainstay. Most of them were either being canceled or going half reprint. So Vince Colletta was not getting his quota of pages, and he went to DC and said, you gotta give me some work to make up for all this stuff I'm losing on the romance comics. How about giving me all the Kirby stuff? And he made a deal with all of it. And so there were two categories here at work. One was the dynamic that we've got to have it done in New York where we can supervise it and put the DC touch on it, and Colletta was a guy who came into the office and brought his work in, which Mike was not going to do. And secondly was, we got to take care of our people, and Vince was a guy who'd worked for the company for a while, and we got to find something for him to do rather than cast him out in the streets at this point. So those were the two reasons the reason to not use Mike was not a value judgment on the quality of his work. It was loyalty to Vince, and it was loyalty to the geography and this idea that...
Well, and when they finally said yes to me, it was the stipulation I had to do it for less money than they were paying Vince Colletta. So not that it makes a damn bit of difference in the year 2019, but I inked all those early issues of Jack Kirby's Fourth World for $15 a page.
This
and
is why I
$2
didn't become a
letter.
comic book artist, by the way.
And one of the things here that people have to understand about Mike and about Jack was that DC was prepared to go, oh, maybe Jack will learn a lesson, when he comes crawling back to us to say, I can't get a book lettered and inked out here on time, on schedule. And Mike Royer is, I've worked with an awful lot of people in comics. Mike is as reliable as anyone who ever worked in comics. He and Dan Spiegel never missed a deadline in their lives. And then Mike worked for me on some of the Hanna-Barbera comics also. Everything was right, on time, and perfect. If we had to design the perfect guy for Jack to hire as his inker, it was Mike Royer. I mean, Frank Giacoia was a wonderful inker. Frank Giacoia was late frequently. And there were some wonderful letterers who weren't as good as reliable as Mike.
But that's also why Vince Colletta was employed, for the same reason.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of guys in comics were reliable, but that was not the place for someone to be unreliable.
Mike Royer was great and on time, which as a freelance illustrator is very difficult to match quantity with quality. But Mike Royer is, I think, poster child for
Well, I
that.
learned from my mentors in 1965, the secret was you got your first job on your ability, and you continue to get the work based on your dependability.
Right, nice, I like that.
Yeah.
Moving on, do you remember anything about this Dan Atkins pencil and ink star that only was seen in Marvelmania? It was never published in Marvel.
Starhawk was a comic book that Roy and Dan Atkins had developed. I don't know if remember if Roy wrote it or not, or somebody else wrote it, but it was a project of Roy's, and they had developed this, and Martin Goodman didn't like it, and I think they didn't finish the first story. I don't remember much about it, but
Yeah, but didn't the character show up in this original Guardians of the Galaxy in 1969 on the
At
right?
the time I'm talking about, the Guardians of the Galaxy hadn't even been started, I think, maybe. Or maybe it hadn't. No, it hadn't.
Because look at what I found. I found this on the internet.
Yeah.
Did this appear? Right.
Yeah.
Of Marvel superheroes,
Yeah.
it was an ad that went reprint instead.
See,
But did the issue appear?
Let me explain what happened was with that Marvel changed distributors in 1968, I think. I may be off by a year on some of this stuff here. And they wanted a lot of new comics because when DC was distributing their books, they were limited in the quantity they could put out. They had they had to keep going and say, please let us add another book. Please let us add 2 more books. Now they were unlimited. So they did a whole bunch of new comics. And a lot of them were aborted after one issue, and like there was remember on a book called Marvel Superheroes, there was in one issue there was
Right.
Kazar, done by George Tuscan. That was going to be the first issue of a brand new monthly Kazar comic. There was one issue of a Doctor Doom story that Larry Lieber did. That was going to be the first issue of a monthly Doctor Doom comic. So they were kind of like, it's like.
Like its version of Showcase or Brave
Yeah,
and Bold.
but except that this was.
For you DC fans out there.
Showcase published stuff that they were hoping would catch on, and Marvel Superheroes published stuff they'd already written off and given up on. So.
But that would be a great advertising slogan.
So Starhawk was done, something to start, and it was canceled at some point.
And by the way, Atkins was known for being a swipe artist. That was one of the marks against him. Anybody that recognizes Wally Wood's Dynamo, or Dynamo as we called him from Thunder Agents, recognizes that pose. Here's an oddball Starhawk image that I found on the internet. Do you know what this is? January 15th, something reaching all serious comic collectors. The cover, excuse me, of a fanzine or something?
Yeah, and Atkins and Wood were both selling sketches to fanzines for covers and things like that.
Right, so that's Atkins pencils and Wood inking him? That's what the credit says at the bottom. That's an odd
I
combination.
think some of those credits are dubious on who did what.
Yeah, but like that whole figure is swiped from something.
Atkins used to swipe Kirby drawings and ink them and then sign them Kirby Adkins as if he had inked a drawing the jacket actually penciled.
But look at how
Way back in
Starhawk,
those days, I liked Adkins' work, but it bothered me that he swiped so much until I realized that he had worked with Wally Wood, and Wally Wood's mantra was,
if you can steal it, if you can trace it, if you can copy it, you know, but as an illustrator myself, the art, quote unquote, is how you do it, where you in a sense cover the swipe and make it your own. Wood was a master because he had such a definite style of inking that no matter what he swiped or traced or copied or pasted in, it still kind of looked like lesser artists make their swipes more obvious, and that's how you can gauge, in a sense, the men from the boys. But look at how Starhawk emerges in the 70s as a viable Marvel character, right? And is he still, I'm not a current Marvel reader, but is he still part of the Marvel universe? I ask rhetorically. Okay, on to Marvelmania number 4 with this oddball cover.
Yeah, Mike gave me, Mike, when he was at the Marvel, doing the Marvel superhero cartoons, a lot of work was done on the Submariner comics. Original work was done on the Submariner cartoons. You remember they did Iron Man, Captain America, the Hulk, Thor, and Submariner. And originally that show was going to be the first 4 plus Spider-Man. There's a sales presentation film I have a copy of where Stan Lee is pitching this thing to syndication market, and it's Spider-Man is the 5th character. They made a deal to sell Spider-Man to ABC for Saturday morning, so they replaced him with a Submariner. The problem was that this series adapted printed comic book stories to television, and there had not been that many Submariner stories, so they created some original ones, and a bunch of the guys there, like Doug Wildey and Herb Hazelton and Sparky Moore, did the equivalent of the drawings that were taken from the comic books.
and I wound up inking a lot of their stuff and picked up a lot of valuable stuff from these guys. It was a real experience being the only person there that had ever read a Marvel comic book. And then working with all these guys who were like icons, and I'm rubbing elbows with them, and they're giving me tips and so on. Our art director was Mike Ahrens, and he was Big Mike, and I was Little Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, Marvelmania number 5.
Now,
Speaking of Spider-Man.
I left after number 4.
Why?
The company was too crooked, and Steve Sherman and I quit. We decided the company was cheating too many people. They were not delivering the merchandise they were selling people. They were not paying people who were doing work for them. They were not paying Jack Kirby his royalties, and we just up and quit one day.
So who worked on the magazine when you left?
A couple of kids who ran in and said, "Oh,
Steve Sherman was
no, Steve
nothing
left."
more-
Yeah, I quit one day, and Steve quit 2 weeks later because he was waiting to try to. See, the way we worked there is I was in charge of the creative stuff, the design of stuff and things, and the magazine. And Steve was partly involved in that and partly involved in the shipping. And he wanted to ship out a bunch of product before he left to make sure it got out to the fans who'd ordered it. So he stayed until that one shipment was done, and then he quit. and we went, off to do other things, including working with Jack. We were overlapped, we were working with Jack while we were still finishing Marvelmania stuff.
So what do you know about this image?
That was, okay, this is something that, a little complicated here, this is gonna take a minute. The, Don Wallace, this man I met who ran Marvelmania, he had a company that did 3D postcards. You've seen these postcards or pictures where there's like a ribbed plastic finish on the
Right.
drawing, and if you hold it at certain angles, it's got layers of depth. He worked for a company that was doing those. He had a company that was publishing those, and he had licensed the Marvel characters in the first place to use in Marvel superhero 3D postcards. He had dioramas made of a couple of the Marvel characters, and he made these dioramas. He wanted to do those for Marvelmania, so he commissioned Jack at one point to design 3D scenes, horizontal 3D scenes. This drawing was made to be printed horizontally, not
Really?
So
there's more art on left and right?
Well, it's a drawing, it's turned left. If you flip this on the left, if you flip this drawing over, 45 degrees, it makes more sense. But he had
I always
done,
wondered about that. I always thought it was odd.
he
You're
had done
right.
about eight or 10 of these pencil drawings, which were intended to be used by someone who would make models, 3D models that could be photographed. That's why they have such weird perspective in them. And if you look, there's a Thor one that Jerry Ordway inked for the cover of Kirby Collector. There's a Doctor Doom one. There's a Captain America. There's a one with a Hulk reaches coming out at you. There's a pencil drawings that were made not to be printed or inked, but to be used for 3D dioramas, and this was one of them.
Wow.
And the guys who took over from me when I left the magazine found it and used it as a cover.
Dioramas were never made.
The dioramas were never made. Tons of stuff Jack did for Marvelmania were never made.
Without
and
the-
he was never paid for it.
Well, Jim Steranko even,
Jack not only was never paid for these drawings, but he got the originals back to these, because Steve and I smuggled him a lot of his artwork back, and then he loaned them to a convention for an art show, and somebody stole them out of the convention.
well, Jim Steranko came out to the West Coast for one full week to do some stuff at Marvelmania. He lived with me, with my family. We turned our whole life upside down, went to bed at 3 a.m., got up at 1 p.m., and he was there for a
Steranko
week,
hours.
and he penciled these super villains for Marvelmania. And as a reward or as payment for staying with us for a week, he gave me the originals, which I inked.
I don't think those were ever printed or published.
I don't know
but
if they were ever,
Yes, they were published.
and I also
Okay.
penciled.
Super Villains, penciled by Steranko and inked by Royer,
Yeah.
were published at Marvelmania?
Yes, they never.
As what?
They didn't say Steranko on them.
And there was a whole
So what were
series,
they? Poster?
It
Image?
was a kit. It was like a folder of drawings in an envelope.
there was a
Yeah,
whole
I've never
series of
seen
Spider-Man drawings, Spider-Man and all the villains of Spider-Man.
By
I
Steranko?
penciled and inked lifting
No.
art, for me, that I lifted, was inspired by stuff in the
But these
Spider-Man comic.
Steranko things, I've never seen them on the internet. I've never seen them at conventions. Has anybody ever seen what Mark's talking about?
Well, at Dallas Con, at the end of November, Steranko was a couple tables away from me, and he held up one of the drawings and says, "You inked this, didn't you, Mike?" And I said, "Yep, when you
Wow.
stayed at the house, you know."
I can't believe it. Anyway, the next issue, Marvelmania number 6, happens to have a penciled cover by Neil Adams. Again, I know you weren't there, but do you have any idea what this was for?
No, I was persona non grata at the office.
Okay, well, one of the reasons why I'm highlighting this issue is when you look inside, every issue of Marvelmania featured fan art that fans would send in. Now, was that prevalent when you were doing the magazine?
Yeah, that was.
Was that your idea?
No, that was Don Wallace's idea.
Didn't I do a Silver Surfer pinup for you?
Yes, one of my issues, you did a Silver Surfer drawing.
Okay, so the interesting thing is when you turn the page of this issue with the Neil Adams cover, you see one piece of art. Who is that on the left? Is that Don Glutt or something like
Don
that?
Blue, if it's
Don,
Don
is that?
Blue, I don't know if that's him, but.
Okay.
the man's name-
And then, who is this artist on the right? But yes, that's me at 12 years old, sending in my first piece of fan art ever published. This is my first published piece of art. Now, why would I draw the Golden Age Iron Man? I mean, I don't even think at the time, I don't think my brother had this back issue. I think I must have been influenced in Marvel superheroes or in his own comic when Gene Colan got to draw the bulky Iron Man. I think this was 1960. It had to be the influence, that particular pose, because we had never seen Gene Colan draw the bulky Iron Man, but I've got to believe that's the influence. And remember fountain pens, where you had to put a little cartridge of ink? That's what I used, and you can always tell an amateurish young artist by their signature, so look at my signature at 12 years old. But yes, that's why, as a fanboy, you know, Mike, you were inking for Marvelmania, you were producing it, and I was a fanboy on the other end, ingesting it all. So that's why Marvelmania will always have a special place in my heart. Now here's that membership card you talked about.
Yeah, this is from, this is Sam Rosen lettering, if you're interested. And Jack had done this drawing, and it was colored by Maurice Severin, I believe. And
Another rare Kirby Spider-Man figure.
yeah, and it was part of the original kit, which was designed.
Did Jack ink these? Or you said?
I think Jack inked these, yes.
Yeah, very rare for Jack Kirby to ink those stuff.
Yes.
But look at how they use some of those figures. This was the Marvelmania catalog, the front and back cover.
Okay, now hold on.
Yeah.
This drawing of the Marvel, this was another of the 8 posters that wasn't turned out, wasn't produced.
So one on the right?
The front cover, which is what's on the right there, was a drawing that Jack did. He inked it himself to be one of that line of 8 posters I mentioned earlier. And when 4 posters went away, this drawing was repurposed as the cover of Marvelmania's merchandise catalog.
And I inked a lot of Jack's headings on pages and spot drawings for the catalog.
Okay, when you turn the page of the catalog, we got the Marvel stickers, and I'll highlight each page if there's something you want to say about these. The coloring's kind of funky.
We had
Yeah.
a terrible printer because this man Don Wallace did
Look
everything
at
on the
this
cheap.
harsh coloring.
Yeah, he did everything on the cheap. He got cheap color separators and cheap printers and all this.
Well, you get this kind of work when the printer pays you to do it.
But like, where did that Kirby weird Iron Man head come from?
Well, what this was, originally,
Pretty funky, that Iron Man head, right?
the story of Marvelmania, in part, is a story of a Purdue promoter who thought he had something that was going to make zillions of dollars, and he thought it was going to be a much, much bigger thing than it was. Initially, he was going to put out like 50 different line decal sheets and 40 posters, because he thought the marketplace would support it, and it wasn't. It wasn't there. One of the decal sheets was drawn originally by Jack. This was a drawn page where Wallace took, he had all these tons and tons of black and white stats of current recent Marvel comics. And he was always cutting them up and repaging them to try to invent merchandise. And he, at one point, cut up a bunch of things and had made kind of a rough mock-up of this, and he gave it to Jack to redraw. And Jack, with Ra's inking, we got 5 minutes, Arlen.
That's okay.
And Jack, with his wife helping him ink, he drew these pages, this decal sheet, and then they replaced some of the drawings with stats. The lower left-hand corner, the blue thing.
What the hell is that?
Is a character that they cut off of a splash page from a Maurice Severin Submariner pasted in there. And a couple of the other ones are from other places. So it's kind of part Kirby,
Oddball.
part not.
Oddball. Okay, this was one of the very first ads I remember seeing in the comics, a half-page Marvel ad showing that they're going to have. Look at that on the left. It says that there's another Captain America. It says poster, but that was a cover of a Captain America issue, but was it done for
Yes.
Marvelmania?
No. Wallace picked out a cover at random and made it into a poster that came in the...
But this was never produced.
Yes, it was.
It was?
Yes.
Another one I never saw.
Yes,
It.
yes, the whole
This
kit
was a 2 foot by 3 foot?
This was a 2 foot by 3 foot poster. I've got 50 of them in my garage.
I have never seen these offered for
Yeah,
sale.
Anyway, these...
Are you selling any?
No, I'm not selling anything.
I hate you.
This is the ad I saw that day that prompted me to go to the phone booth, I told you.
Don't I get one for putting this presentation together?
If I ever get to the garage, I'll find it.
Yeah. I won't be waiting by the phone. Anyway, here's some other oddball thing. Again, using Kirby artwork as you go through another volume. That's the back cover.
And that's an inside front cover, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, okay. right?
Okay, then you turn another page.
Okay. These
There's
were-
the posters.
These were to be 8 Jack Kirby posters, but Marvel killed 4 of them, and so the Black Knight, the Captain America, the Spider-Man, and the Hulk replaced Kirby posters. The Hulk one replaced a Kirby poster of,
We're gonna go into that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're gonna go into almost each individual poster.
okay?
Of course, here was a separate ad for just the Kirby posters.
I designed this ad.
Ah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Now, we had seen Kirby do things like double-page spread pinups, but he had never done specifically. You know, the irony about all this Kirby Marvelmania stuff is that it came just as he was leaving Marvel. That's what I found so ironic. In other words, he saved the best for last. I mean, this is one of the great and very rare for Kirby to ink himself. This is one of the greatest FF images, but I remember my brother and I getting this, and my brother was such a Kirby devotee. Kirby leaving Marvel killed my brother's love of comics. He hated Coletta's inks on the Fourth World stuff. He didn't even stick around long enough till you came and saved the inks. But I mean, these images for us came kind of with a bittersweet, melancholy edge because Kirby had actually left Marvel just when these came out, right?
These came out before. The Marvelmania's ads appeared in July of 1969. Jack signed his DC deal in March of the following year,
70.
70. So,
But I'm saying, as this stuff rolled out, 69 to 70, it was bittersweet because Kirby leaving Marvel, for you young people out there, was the pop culture equivalent in 1970 of the Beatles breaking up. I mean, that was the impact of Kirby leaving Marvel. But look, Kirby here in his later years, I'm gonna say this is late 90s? I don't know.
I don't know.
But you know, look at how he felt proud enough to have that FF image. Here's another photograph showing Kirby at his home with the giant FF poster frame. One of his great posters, maybe the single greatest image of Dr. Doom ever drawn. Again, Kirby inks. This poster has been reprinted in various things by some European publishers, like weirdly colored like this, or silkscreen. Look at this oddball one.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, that's Jack's lettering of Dr. Doom at the top.
Nice. Okay, then you got the superhero buttons. Many of these things, as a fan, I never saw, you know, but so be it.
Heritage Auctions was selling the original to these button designs, and they claimed that I inked them. I did not ink them, Jack.
Okay, then we've got the great Thor poster. Again, in the comics, a year or two earlier, we got this great full page of him swinging the hammer, another classic cover right around the time of the Marvelmania poster. This is inked by Verpoorten,
Yes.
right? So kind of a one-off ink job of Jack's. And then we got this pose, which again, to me, is maybe the single greatest Thor image Kirby ever drew. If you want to pick classic. And again, he saved the best for last. But here's Kirby, once again, with photographs of those posters. Then you get, once again, a pretty iconic Silver Surfer Galactus
And what
image.
you're doing is giving an illustration of the consummate professional that Jack Kirby was. Even though he was changing masters, the work never lost its luster and its originality, because he was a dyed-in-the-wool professional.
And here's another.
The original Silver Surfer poster, the first one version Arlen showed, was the best-selling thing Marvelmania ever put out.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, because it was the two of them in one poster, maybe?
Yeah, and it's Marie Severin colored that.
Yeah, nice. And like I said, here's another funky European silkscreen version of it. Of course, Kirby had created Galactic Silver Surfer in 1968. You can see the anger in this